I'm just approaching St. Nicholas's Church. It says here on the sign, founded in the 12th century. I've cycled here, although as is always the case when you get on your bike, things are just a little bit further away than you think. Just approaching the front gate now. Just realised I've forgotten my bike lock, but I'd like to think nobody would steal a bike in the eyes of God. But you never really know. So St. Nicholas's Church is in the lovely, quaint village of Newnham in northeast Hampshire, and I'm fortunate enough that it's a very short, not as short as I thought, but a pretty short cycle away. And I thought it was very important for this particular poem that I did travel here by bike. Something very different than getting in the car. I'm a relatively new cyclist. This lovely road bike I've got here in a sort of royal blue is was my dad's, and not being much of a cyclist, I've had to sort of train myself up a bit to make sure that I know how to use it. Oh, there we go. But despite one small rain shower, it's been a particularly lovely morning. Now we're going to see if I can fail the first test, and that is the church in fact open? The moment of truth. Now, I have no cycle clips, but I do have a cycling helmet, which I've removed in hopefully not too awkward of a show of reverence. Once I am sure there's nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. Another church, matting, seats, and stone, and little books, sprawlings of flowers, cut for Sunday, brownish now, some brass and stuff up at the holy end, the small, neat organ, and a tense, musty, unignorable silence brewed God knows how long. Hatless, I take off my cycle clips in awkward reverence. Move forward, run my hand around the font. From where I stand, the roof looks almost new, cleaned or restored. Someone would know. I don't. Mounting the lectern, I peruse a few hectoring, large-scale verses and pronounce, "Here endeth," much more loudly than I'd meant. The echoes snigger briefly. Back at the door, I sign the book, donate an Irish sixpence, reflect the place was not worth stopping for. Yet stop I did. In fact, I often do, and always end much at a loss like this, wondering what to look for, wondering too, when churches fall completely out of use, what we shall turn them into. If we shall keep a few cathedrals chronically on show, their parchment, plate, and pyx in locked cases, and let the rest rent-free to rain and sheep, shall we avoid them as unlucky places? Or, after dark, will dubious women come to make their children touch a particular stone, pick simples for a cancer, or on some advised night see walking a dead one? Power of some sort or other will go on, in games, in riddles, seemingly at random. But superstition, like belief, must die, and what remains when disbelief has gone? Grass, weedy pavement, brambles, buttress, sky. a shape less recognisable each week, a purpose more obscure. I wonder who will be the last, the very last, to seek this place for what it was. One of the crew that tap and jot and know what rude lofts were? Some ruin bibber, randy for antique, or Christmas addict, counting on a whiff of gown and bands and organ pipes and myrrh? Or will he be my representative? Bored, uninformed, knowing the ghostly silt dispersed, yet tending to this cross of ground through suburb scrub, because it held unspilt so long and equably what since is found only in separation, marriage, and birth, and death, and thoughts of these for which was built this special shell. For, though I've no idea what this accoutred frowsty barn is worth, it pleases me to stand in silence here. A serious house, on serious earth it is, in whose blent air all our compulsions meet, are recognised and robed as destinies, and that much never can be obsolete. Since someone will forever be surprising a hunger in himself to be more serious, and gravitating with it to this ground, which he once heard was proper to grow wise in, if only that so many dead lie round. I was given a bit of clearance this morning from the girls to come and record this. And I won't lie, I very nearly said, you know what, don't worry about it, I'll stay at home. I feel bad for leaving you both while I go off and prance around doing this poetry show, but I'm very, very glad that I did get out. Because actually, and I'm going to talk about this in some detail as well as the poem, even this staunch atheist is very pleased to stand in silence right here. Well, I say silence, you can probably hear that bird chirping away somewhere up in the rafters here. I can't see it, but I can hear it. I do feel like this particular church, obviously being such an old one, very much a very, very sort of compact space, actually. Far smaller than I thought, and you probably can hear there's not a huge echo. The roof is very high, timber beamed, dark wood, and we've got a lot of Norman iconography, sort of French fleur-de-lis sort of stuff over here, and the stained glass is absolutely gorgeous to look at on one side, and on the other side is plain. There's a bunch of plastic Union flags lined up along here, as well as, of course, the crest over here. And we do have here a dedication in loving memory to the Right Honourable Sir Frederick John Wriothesley. What a name. Born March 1880, died November 1948. And right here up at the very, very top end, we've got some lovely morning sun coming through as well, really, really showing it in all of its sort of glory here. We have, obviously, the resurrection and angels and disciples and haloed individuals looking up in awe. So, I guess the fundamental question with this poem is, what is Larkin saying about religion? I mean, this poem is 70 years old this year, and religion in this country has definitely changed. Certainly at the time of writing, the 1950s, you could definitely argue that the UK, and England especially, was far more of a Christian country, and openly Christian, than maybe it is now. And certainly the huge amount of other faiths and other places of worship, are I would say now, more than ever, plain to see everywhere. We live in a far more cosmopolitan world, freedom of expression, freedom of faith. But of course, Larkin, being an atheist, and quite a staunch atheist too, it does always resonate with me, this poem, because for a long time growing up, I was very unfortunate. And I use that phrase, unfortunate, because I feel like I missed out on religion. My parents were of the classic type where my dad was raised very, very Catholic up in Preston, and with all that would entail. And I think it was a very traumatizing time for him, and he very much turned his back on his faith. And it's something I never really properly discussed with him, although what I do know is that he liked the idea of me finding faith of any kind in anything for myself. And it's one of the greatest gifts I think my parents gave, in one way, was that freedom. But on the other hand, there's a small part of me that wishes that I'd just been indoctrinated in one particular way of thinking so that I could have the comfort of belief. And maybe that's where Larkin was when he wrote this poem. Certainly the poetic speaker is caught, much as I am now, between two states of mind. The first being one of skepticism, cynicism, sort of tongue-in-cheek, standing up at the lectern and pretending to be the priest or the reverend and sort of saying, "Here endeth," and things like that. And yet he takes off his cycle clips in an awkward gesture of reverence. He doesn't really know what he's supposed to do. He knows he shouldn't wear a hat. And I took off my cycle helmet before I came in. Why? I don't know. I don't personally believe in a God. I don't believe that when we die we go to heaven or to hell. But I still feel like there is a small but very, very powerful sense of place when you walk into any religious building. But of course, the oldest religious buildings in this country are the churches. And I think of the humans that have stood right here. I think of, when this whole area, which is now what Larkin would have referred to as suburb scrub, I think of all the people that would have been here throughout different points of our history. Not just the worshippers, but the skeptics, the people like me, the people looking for something, but not quite knowing what. And maybe, on one hand, this is a bit of a poem about being in the moment. You don't have to find God in the house of God. You can find God anywhere if you are of that sort of inclination, I would imagine. You find the glory of God in everyday things. And yet, for the faithless, being in a church is a grounding experience. We've also got the concept of what it means to be human, what it means to look up. We have the lovely line about the buttress, the sky, him looking up and up, somewhat reminiscent of high windows towards the end there, when it becomes almost beyond any sense of comprehension. And that line, "I wonder who will be the last, the very last, to seek this place for what it was." And he asked that question, or will he be my representative? Now, of course, he goes on to explain that this representative would be bored, uninformed, etc. But because he leaves that line hanging there, without the question mark, it's almost a statement of, well, whoever is here now, talking about whoever might be down the road, 70 years down the road, of course. I'm not saying that Larkin's talking about me, I'm not that egocentric, but the idea of somebody somewhere, a bit like him, who doesn't really know and wants to find meaning in something. Tending to this cross of ground. I always loved that line. I grew up obviously near Winchester, and The cathedral is a huge part of life in Winchester. You can't really move without seeing all sorts of images of it on tourist sort of things, and of course the actual cathedral itself is a wonderful building, and you've got the sort of new facade of it which looks particularly stunning, but then you've also got the old Norman side of it which does look very, very sort of antique and flinty and hard and sort of kind of scary in a way. I think some of this is Larkin's approach to overall religion being something that intimidates him. And this is his way of trying to make some sort of peace with it within himself. I do remember one of the first times I did go into a church as a kid, seeing a particularly graphic representation of the crucifixion and being pretty disturbed, actually. And that idea of, you look around and then of course you get to the existential idea of, well, what happens when we die? There is a fundamental understanding that this place, this cross of ground, it is the big moments in one's life, or it used to be marriage, birth, or christening, of course, and death. And thoughts of these, for which was built this special shell. And I love that special shell. It's built by humans. It might be built in the name of God, but it's still built by men, women. Its congregation are humans. And one person stands at the front wearing different coloured robes and tells everybody else what to do. There's a sense of the shell being almost superficial. The church is a microcosm of society. It's a microcosm of what we want life to look like. And we could go into more detail, of course, about the idea of, in this particular church, I can't help but notice that all of the glorious stained glass depicts Jesus and everybody else here as white folk with sort of fair hair and blue eyes. But then isn't that what we're all about? We want things to relate to us. And we have, I think, a bit of a duty to ourselves in this modern world, which feels increasingly polarised, to find common ground with one another. And even though I don't believe in a God, I do believe in people. A serious house on serious earth. In whose blent air all our compulsions meet, are recognised and robed as destinies. I feel this line gets overlooked because there's so many other great lines within this. Robed as destinies. It always makes me think of Macbeth, that line. The Thane of Cawdor lives. Why do you dress me in borrowed robes? This idea that you can put a robe around something and call it something, and eventually it becomes that thing. But this idea that we've created an entire institution as human beings, we've made something. And it is a deep skepticism that he has, but it's funny, it doesn't quite give way to ridicule. It's almost in spite of all of this that Larkin still feels on some level that this is actually the point. That even though it might not be all true, there's still something in this which keeps people coming back. And it says, that much never can be obsolete. I just stepped back outside now to sort of get a bit of a sense of the grounds themselves, where so many dead lie around, and there's quite a lot of them. Some of these graves are so old I can't actually make out anything on them at all, really. Barely even a name. As is always the case, though, if you walk around graveyards, it's the ones that aren't so old that really get to me. 2007, which for me feels like yesterday, but of course definitely a while ago. We have 2019. We have a couple of others over here. And I always feel a bit awkward treading anywhere near with the Garden of Remembrance, and I'm not going to read any names out of respect. We have our first one here from 2020. And the birds are mocking me from their place of safety up there. The entirety of this church is walled with flint. And it gives it this fantastic mosaic, higgledy-piggledy sort of look. And next to it, of course, is the old yew tree. A babbling brook nearby. I must admit, when I lived abroad, I lived in South Korea, I really missed two things. I missed three things. I missed games of cricket. I missed pubs. And weirdly enough, I actually really missed churches. I think I missed the idea that I could do what I'm doing right now and get on the bike and go out somewhere, and I haven't seen a single soul since I've been here. And there were churches in South Korea, of course, but I didn't really want to go in them for fear of being converted or recruited by the quite fundamentalist groups that they would have out there. Plus, of course, the buildings themselves are what make the place. Well, I guess I better saddle up and get going again. Otherwise there'll be some very unhappy girls in my household. But I feel like this poem will continue to resonate with me for the rest of my life. Not least because there is something about churches. This real pull that they have, even for people like me. And for the faithful. And if you are a person of faith listening to this, and I hope that you don't feel that I've been disrespectful. It's never ever my intention. My rule has always been live and let live, and be nice to people, because that's what I believe we should do in the world, and the world would be a better place for it. But if you are a person of faith, I don't think this poem takes a shot at religion at all. I think it, if anything, it shows the conundrum, the paradox, if you like, of non-belief. Because by not believing, you are still able to sort of walk into a place like this and be moved, even if only by the fact that, just as right now, so many dead lie round. And even though they can't teach us anything anymore, we can hope